We back at it again. Here's Minx of the Blue Sea. How y'all be? We here early. I mean, real early today. But that's okay because I had the early morning time and I got to skip some. So I'm like, oh, we woke up to that hot and fresh chapter. Y'all know what it is, man. Chapter 10, 21, Savage. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, don't care about the cover. Y'all know how I feel about the Tone Tide. I've been saying it for years. I still like to go back and watch the scene from the anime when we first see Rob Lucci again with Stussy and he slams Leo into the ground. That's just, it's always nice to rewatch that at least once a month, right? But we get into some narration, which is interesting because we don't really know who would be narrating the section of information, but whatever, right? So they're talking about the fact that, the numbers that we started off with, which I think was like a 6-1 or 5-1 ratio. And we whittled that down to a couple of chapters ago, it was like 16,000 to 9,000, which is, one a little less than 2-1. We'll take those, right? Even what Jinbei said, we never expected the 1v1, so it is what it is out here. This is war, so yeah, there's that. And then they talk about the fact that like the Flying Six are confirmed defeated. I was under the impression that at least with the Who's Who, you know, he probably wasn't finished yet, and possibly Sasaki. Black Maria, you could kind of tell it was over with her just because of what Robin did to her was a lot different than what the other characters. Well, not really. Who's Who got cracked with the ultimate fist, but I don't know. I really thought Who's Who might have. I mean, we know his plot point isn't over just because of the information that he has, right? And why Cypher Poe is there supposedly is to confirm and or take out Who's Who. So we know we're not done with him, even though he's defeated specifically. And in regards to Black Maria, I don't know how that comes into play with her failure, right, of capturing Robin, and what Kaido does about that, if anything at all. Because now it has another situation, like I was talking about before, where the bigger threats all have other big threats to deal with. So the worst people that could go after Robin still can't, right? Whoa, no, 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 no. It's still having a parental a parental talk with Yamato on top of Roof Piece, right? And Big Mom, we just seen in this chapter, is still fighting against Kid in Law. So and King and Queen, of course, we'll get to the end of the chapter, obviously. But those are the main people that you would be concerned about going after Robin in comparison to the other fighters, right? Where Robin is strong, and even with Jinbei, if they're together, like if Brooke, Robin, Jinbei, and Frankie can band together now that their fights are over, because they're gonna have other stuff to do, they have a better chance of survival if they run into one of the really super big bads out here in these streets. But for the time being, I just think they're still gonna be fine, right? And so with the issue with the Flying Six is Ulti and Pepe. I don't really think that we're done seeing them for the rest of the arc. And of course, we know what was going on with X Drake. So Sasaki might be out the story because he didn't seem all that relevant to the plot, other than the fact that he knows what a helicopter is. And, there's been some theories about if he's related to certain characters, but that's another story for another day. So we get into where the location of Onigashima is, which is 15 minutes to the destination of the flower capital. How they know how much time, again, who's narrating, who really cares, I guess. But it's just interesting. They know to the exact minute how long it'll take to get there. And in the background, we see Luffy is pretty much cleaned out house as far as all the rations that Caribou had, you know. But the fact that he's still full right now, you know, depending on how big Momo is as an adult dragon, if he stays in this form, are we getting ready to see like Tank Man, like that, he's already slower than Kaido as it is. So I don't know, but from the way back in Dressrosa that like when he fought Cracker, the way he said, and there's been plenty in the community. We all notice the same thing, as far as like Gear Fourth having different forms within it. That Tank Man might not like, because he says like depending on which version of the anime, right, and all that, he calls Tank Man like full stuffed version, as if there's another form of Tank Man that can be used differently. And then what we know about with Red Rock now, um, maybe he needs a lot, like a more massive form, similar But I just don't understand why he just wouldn't use Gear Fourth. Maybe it's a hockey efficiency thing, um, especially now that we're applying Conquerors to attack. So maybe that has something to do with it, or this is just silly and he hasn't turned back into normal base form yet. Maybe that's just all it is, and I'm reading too far into it. But that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like every time I see him as Fat Luffy now, I think about his Tank Man. So maybe that's why. But we've seen the scrubs in the background. They weren't really doing anything. They were just sitting there. And then we get to Raizo versus Fukurokujo. We've been waiting for this battle. Um, of course, the nin in me. You knew we were going to see some cockaboo shit, man. There's just no way around it. It's what Raizo does, man. But Fukurokujo's the name of his earlobe crackers. I don't know if it's going to stay like that. Maybe it's more like a. I'm not really sure what weapon they would be, but just remember that song when you're a kid, like the Ice Cream Man. Do your ears hang low? There was a rap version that came out somewhere in the mid 2000s with that one dude. I forgot his name, but he had the beat from that song. Does your chain hang low? That's what it was. That's all. That's what I thought about when I seen Fukuroku Joe's moves. But that's sad, but that's what happened. And this is something for, of course, those of you who've been rocking me for a minute. I've been talking about ever since Odin's flashback with the Obi-Wan and that's their situation with what their loyalty, where their loyalties lie, and why do they lie that way? Because of course, like we always support the Viz, so some of this in the chapter translation wise, I'm sure will be different, but maybe not so much with Raizo and Fukurokujo. But he says something to the effect of, and it was something I brought up where they just the dogs of the shogunate archetype where they don't care who's in power, they just follow them. But even then, that still doesn't make any sense because a lot of the stuff that happened, right, within the current Wano arc have to do with the Obi-Wan not doing their job in regards to Sukiyaki, right? They didn't know about the body double stuff. I mean, it's implied that they did, but they just didn't do anything to stop what was happening from Orochi taking over in the first place with Sukiyaki. So it's just like, if you guys serve whoever the current shogun is, right, would that mean if Momo takes over as shogun, hypothetically speaking, you would follow him too? And that just doesn't seem to be the case. So that's not really true. It only applies to this situation with Orochi and Kaido, in a sense, or Yamato, the implied uh, ruler of Wano to be Yamato as well, because I'm sure they know about that, right? But it's just a very, it's like a wish-washy statement because if that was the case, like I said, there's none of this ever would have happened because they would have stopped Orochi, right, from taking out Sukiyaki in the first place. And it just that always bothered me about them. So like even with Fukurokujo, depending on where his actual loyalty lies, he may have. I still think he has an ulterior motives, and this isn't just Wano related. It might be something a little bit more deeper. If not, that's fine. But that's just what I think about him because, like I said, none of this really adds up. Unless he just like always was about Kaido and he knew this was coming. You know what I mean? I just never got it. I never understood that. But Raizo did say, and the paneling was interesting, right? You see the graves. And the theme about ghosts and Wano has been a thing, right? Since we've seen how the Wano people react to Brook and the lore of the ghost, right down to Orochi, right? Who's been technically was right this whole time, right? He was worried about ghosts and everybody made fun of him. And of course, we know it was because of the time travel situation. But as far as he's concerned, it might as well be the same thing. You know what I mean? So it's like this theory, this theme of ghosts and celebrating the dead because of the fire festival and with Black Maria's type of abilities, right, in that fight with Robin, and like just that whole theme and some of the yokai stuff we've seen, like with Big Mom, the sandals and the broom and the hat stuff, like when she was making the new homies, right? We've seen her before. After I want to say it was during that time period, like when Frankie was trolling her and Usopp was running from her and stuff like that. We've seen Big Mom turn some items into some yokai type things. So, like this whole thing about Ghost and Wano and the celebration of the dead, like I was just saying, there seems to be a reasoning behind it. Whether it has an effect on the plot point, as far as like, because we think Kinemon's probably dead, right? At the bare minimum, him and Ashura Doji. And the fact that some of them may have been dead this whole time, like that kind of thing, it touches on that. So I'm actually more interested in that aspect than I was before this chapter because I, I just didn't see it as a. It just seemed like that more like that's cool. But this chapter kind of made it the ghost thing hit different for me as far as like I care about it a little bit more than I did before. So that was kind of cool. To see that play out. And then we know, of course, the situation with Zoro, right? After at the end of Wano, he's gonna want to sit at Ryuma's grave and talk to him, possibly as a ghost. So that was cool to see. Then we go get into the boys, because this is when stuff starts to ramp up, even more so in the chapter. Like a lot of stuff, plot points hit. The boy Hawkins versus I. Man, I've been waiting to get back to this. And we get some groundbreaking stuff, right? And it answers one of those questions that most of us in the series would have about different people with abilities. Like, well, why wouldn't they just make this person a doll? Yeah, well, Hawkins had your back, man. He's been waiting. I don't know how many chapters he's had this doll. When did he do it? Who knows? Maybe he needs your blood. Maybe it happened after they were introduced to Kaido, you know. Maybe when he was locked up in the cell. I just think for the way Hawkins' ability works, he would have to like get some of your blood or something. He can't just create a doll out of nowhere. So something happened that he had the foresight in that maybe he would have to fight Killer eventually anyway, or not just Killer, but Kid himself, right? So good on Hawkins for having the Batman foresight to let me plan ahead, man. I've been playing ahead the whole series, so let me just keep playing ahead because I'm not gonna just get caught slipping, right? As long as I don't run into the triads, I should be all right because he's not watching them, right? And even Law found, did what he had to do. Like it is what it is. But yeah, that threw me off. That really threw me off, and it was funny too, right? Because the other series that I'm starting right now, as far as content is concerned, is I've been rereading the series from start to finish. I do this once every couple of years, so this time I'm recording it, not like it live, but my thoughts and just memories, stuff I forgot. And it's funny because I was just thinking about Hawkins the other day, because one of the cover chapters, um, like in the '80s. There's actually a cover chapter where they go into Kobe and Helmeppo's backstory, right? As far as them being Marines. And one of the covers, Helmeppo had like a voodoo doll of Luffy with the straw hat on him. And I just read that chapter like 2 days ago, I think. maybe it was like 2 or 3 days ago, and I was gonna talk about that because it made me think about Hawkins, who of course isn't even introduced in the story at that time. But the voodoo doll thing, that was just this chapter. Like I said, the funny thing when you reread the series is how um, intentionally sometimes, and then probably just random coincidence, right? Where you just happen to read a part of the story that has something to do with now, even if they're not completely related. Like the Helmeppo thing. Like I said, that was just like 2 days ago. And then we get Hawkins and the voodoo doll thing. Because I remember having a mental note of that. Like, did he still, to. It's one of those things in the series where it's underlying and it may or may not even be important later in the story. But it's just funny that I didn't even remember that. And is he still carrying his voodoo doll of Luffy around, like even now? But yeah, we get that, and then we seen that Kid's actually hurt by this while him and Law are fighting Big Mom, and we see Big Mama, the invincible one, still just standing there looking just, man, y'all know how I feel about Big Mom, man. She's a meme, but when she's not on meme time, man, that's just one interesting character. The undamageable Big Mom, only low diff by herself. That's it. And then what else did we get into? Oh, Marco. Not really surprised, right? Like unless you're a Kainu or Kaido or Big Mom or somebody like that, fighting two first commanders is just not happening. Not of this level. Because I'm sure there are commanders in other crews who, not necessarily Yonko, but even other high tier pirates that are close to Yonko, but they're not Yonko yet. Even their two first commanders, getting watched by another first commander of their caliber just wouldn't make any sense, right? Because then that dude should be the captain. I mean, strength obviously isn't always correspondent to leadership and all that other stuff, but in this series, it is like the captain is just that dude. That's just what it is. So, um, yeah, Marco beating them both wouldn't really make all that much sense to me. But his resiliency makes sense, right? Because what's interesting, right, if you think about it in the context of who Marco has fought in the series, right? I wouldn't be surprised if Kanye could beat King and Quinn by himself. That wouldn't surprise me at all, in the slightest. Blackbeard should be able to do the same thing, especially now. So, not saying easily, but just the ability to just be at that level. Because we do see that within the crew structure, even for how strong First Commander is, the difference between the gap between them and the Yonko are just, it's still extreme, right? Like Katakuri could never beat Big Mom. He could find a way around her to nerf her. Well, I can't say that. I can't say that. He's probably smart enough to figure out a way to nerf and get around her, but just straight up physically one on one, that's not happening, son. You know what I mean? It's just not happening. The closest in the story that you can make that argument for, maybe not now because it conquers coding and whatever the gap is between Luffy and Zoro, but they would probably be the closest in the story. But that's just because they're growing up at the same time. More so than the characters themselves. Like even if Zoro was on a different crew, it wouldn't change how strong him and Luffy are. So it's just like in other crews, I don't think, like, even with the situation with Shanks' crew seeming more balanced, I don't think any of them are beating Shanks either. You know what I mean? It's just not a thing. Um, so seeing this doesn't really make me feel either on either side. You know what I mean? Then you throw on top of that these are two ancient zones, not to mention whatever King's race is, which Marco gets into that, which that's a whole nother discussion. Man, we got some crazy drops this chapter. But, even Sanji, right, fighting them both off screen, and we see he's in the dirt. But that's not no knock on Sanji, because once again, if you're not Admiral or Yonko or something, or Mihawk, guard one of those characters, they're going to wear you down eventually. It's just going to happen. Um, so that's not really Doesn't bother me. And not only that, like Sanji during this time is probably protecting Zoro a lot of the time. You know what I mean? Because it's not just him fighting King or Queen or whoever's in the vicinity. They seem to be focused on Zoro, which they should be. But at the same time, Sanji's not really fighting a focused battle. As usual, he has other tasks at hand and just throwing hands. It's now we see though it's just straight times. Well, not hands in Sanji's case, feet. It's time for him to throw some more feet and legs. Because look, actually, let me talk about the king stuff and other stuff because y'all know how I get about Zoro. So, it is interesting that King and Queen was looking for Zoro though. Now I don't know if this just is a normal tactic because they know he's injured and they know he was on top of the roof, or is it because they know he damaged Kaido and are actually shook about that because he shouldn't be able to do that? Because if he can damage Kaido, he can show damage them. You know what I mean? Just like I was saying that there's a gap in raw strength, especially with Mr. One. Clap Kaido because it's one and you're done, son. You already know about the boy Kaido. So if that's the case and they do know about what exactly went down on a roof piece where Kaido was like, yo, yeah, I took heavy damage and earlier I could have got wiped out if it wasn't for Big Mom. You know what I mean? Like so they're like, hey, nah, we gotta get him out of there. Especially because King seems to understand what they're doing. Like, oh, they're giving him some kind of recovery thing, so we can't, let him get back on his feet because this is going to be all bad. It's going to be all bad. And in the background of this, your boy Petalin, my man out here he out here camping, man, hard. My man's out here camping hard, super hard at the back of the map. One of those guys, man, just chilling, right? Like, just chilling, finna snipe Sanji out the game. And then here comes Mr. Nekomamushi. The funny part about this is I'm coming to avenge Pedro. And like, yeah, they're enemies, but Petalin is like, look, from his standpoint, it's like, I didn't ask him to kamikaze himself, man. How he chose to try to win that fight, that's not, I get it, we were fighting, but I didn't make him do that, man. He did that kind of thing. So it's just funny with Peril Sparrow, but he gets rocked, like, they gave him a good one of them old school Ray Lewis's through the middle. It's poor receiver on the slant. You know what I mean? Like, well, your quarterback led you to doom. That's exactly what happened to him. But they about to get it in. I think, Wanda and Carrot is one thing, but you dealing with Nekomamushi now. Petalin is, it's about to be rough for you. It's just about to be rough for you. There's not enough candy and vans with no windows and puppies to save you, right? It's just not that type of party with Nekomamushi. So I'm going to look forward to that. And it's funny because like Chopper's been talking, he's on Grandpa Chopper time. He's been talking like a grandpa. So some of the stuff he was saying in this chapter, I'm like, why is he talking like that? But then I forgot like the effect of the rubber ball thing and this whole Gear Second Chopper thing that we got going here, merchandising himself, the merchandise man. But Marco was talking about something interesting that nobody knew about, right? A race that lives on top of the red line. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Because that has so many implications, and everybody's about to be in their bag on that one. They have to be. Like, just his wings in general and his whole design already has some feels to it, right? As far as where we think he comes from and why is he important in the first place? Because the way Marco says this is as if this is kind of like a Kekkei Genkai, a bloodline limit ability of his people, where even if he didn't have an ancient zone, he would still be a problem because they're basically walking around with the mirror. They just can't turn into fire. But him, because he was roasting them dudes and when they first showed him in Queen. And Zoans, especially with how Oda does it, they change in size all the time. So you really never know how sometimes I know it's just like a perspective thing, but it just look beastly and intimidating. But we've seen Queen can change size at will. Like, that's just, and Queen's already huge to begin with, right? But the fact that he's not saying or doing anything and he's just conjuring flames, this might be very problematic, right? Because Zoro still is out here basically using the Sharingan to still move some Kinemon, and we see him use against in other situations already in Roof Beat. So it made sense for Zoro to like fight King more so than, even though he could fight either or, because Sanji has access to fire too. Even without the raid suit, he'll fight fire with fire literally, and he can he can actually fly. So in a sense, with Skywalk compared to Zoro, I'm not even sure why he hasn't decided to learn Skywalk by now, but whatever. Like, he can't have every ability in the series, but it would make sense to me for a swordsman to want to have that ability, even if they're not always using it. But that's a whole nother story, right? But the fact that Marco has known about this, right, and he seems to be a neutralizer, not necessarily maybe a hard counter, but at least his flames can neutralize, because we've seen that immortal, what was it called? Immortal thistle technique, that burial thing he did to protect Sanji and Zoro before he said what he said, it's time for the stars of the show to take the stage for the millions and millions of the Mugiwara fans. In this corner, we have a yellow-haired, curly-brown Sanji D. Simsmoke. But today, he's thrown the Sim cape away to do battle. Because when it's time to throw hands, we can't put him on Simsmoke time, man. He's on Blackleg time. I don't know why I said that like that, but we've only seen Sanji and Zoro in a scene together like this, basically limited times in the series, probably on one hand, and the other one being in Wano, right, when they were saving Otama from getting clapped by Orochi, when they both showed up at the same time, and how dope that was. This is even better because what Zoro said right after that had nothing to do with their normal going back and forth. Like, Zoro, the ambition is already there in him. And Sanji's like, hey, yo, I already know what time it is, man. I can taste the ambition in the air, man. We got to get this dub, son. Because getting this dub is just the biggest step that they've probably taken in the entire series, besides, I want to say 3D2Y, honestly, because that changed the entire scope of the series. Because they would have got washed if it wasn't for that. I mean, they technically should have got washed in Whole Cake Island, but that was a Big Mimu was Big Mimu. But as far as their like the biggest steps in not just their abilities but their knowledge within the series, this would be the biggest jump, right? Because they know a lot more about Poneglyphs now, and having interactions with Law, dealing with these other Yonkos in the underground, and just having a better concept of the world that they're in. Zoro seemed to already understand this from jump, because like even at the beginning of the story, he knew who Miyako was. He just didn't know about the Shichibukai for whatever reason and stuff like that. But them having more, like I was talking about in my other video about the beginning of the series with Don Krieg, he wasn't as strong as he thought he was. He was pretty strong though, even for back then. He thought his flaw was lacking in knowledge, and just strive to reaching that point where their knowledge and their talent and their strength are starting to hit the same level. And we see that in this fight, where if you would have told us 2 years ago, that Sanji and Zoro would be fighting, well, 2 years ago in One Piece time, not real life time, but that Sora and Sanji would be able to 1v1 someone the level of a king or queen, you would think it would have to take some magic, powers, friendship nonsense for that to be the case. But that really hasn't been the case like that. They've just had to grind, and then that's just what it is in this series. The series itself is a grind. So the characters, of course, are going to have to do the same thing. And the damage thing, don't know when it's going to come to play for Zoro. Like I said, it might be during an inopportune time because that's happened to him in fights before, right? Like I said, when you're rereading the series, these things pop up in your head very quickly because you're just so used to remembering like the last two arcs. But when you're rereading stuff, like everything pops in your head. But with Zoro, who's never healthy, by the way, it's just pain is a part of his path, right? And I don't, like I said, I just don't hope it happens too goofy in a way where he's ineffective, but I just don't see that happening because the way he jumped out them bandages, boy. Huh, I'm back out the casket. My boy from the south side of Shimosuke Village, man. The senpai of the Santoryu. These guys are about to go in, man. This chapter was just crazy. There's going to be a lot to talk about. I'll probably talk to y'all later on today, but if not, at least by Monday, you'll definitely hear from me because I have some interesting thoughts that um, they coincide with the chapter, but it's just too much to talk about in one video. I try to give y'all a break at least, right? But y'all enjoy the rest of y'all weekend. I'll see y'all somewhere in chat, somewhere in comments, somewhere in streams. Y'all already know what time it is out here, man. Enjoy the greatness. Peace.